How's it going, guys? I hope you had a great Christmas. Now I have this one really awkward spot in my schedule where it's after Christmas, but it's not the new year yet, so I gotta find something kind of Christmassy to fill the spot. And while this isn't really a Christmas movie, it is about toys and toy manufacturing and from a kid's point of view even. So yeah, I'd say this one fits. Big. Now, Big came out in 1988, stars Tom Hanks, and is the story of a kid trapped in a grown man's body. And for me, Big was always this movie that I'd seen a few times, but never really given a lot of thought. I've always liked it. I always thought it was pretty charming. But it wasn't until I was watching it again for this video when I really realized that Big actually has a lot going for it. It's actually a pretty smart comedy with a ridiculous premise. Because this movie is first and foremost about Josh. And Josh is this 12-year-old boy. He's got a best friend. They got a secret handshake. They do all the basic 12-year-old boy shenanigans. And they go to this carnival. They're trying to impress a girl, but he's a little too short to ride the roller coaster. So he makes a wish to a Zoltar machine, these little, fortune teller machines that I'm sure you've seen around. And he wishes that he was big. And Zoltar, having a sense of humor, turns him into a 30-something-year-old Tom Hanks. And that's really where this movie kicks off. And the movie doesn't waste a lot of time getting us there. The time we do spend with young Josh is pretty brief, but not too brief where we don't get a good read on his personality. And yeah, he's your typical 12-year-old boy with all your typical 12-year-old boy issues. But Tom Hanks is really the star of the show here because he's got to do something that has been done a lot of times after this movie came out, but really hadn't been done a lot before this movie came out, and that is to be a grown man acting like a child. Which on the surface, you're like, oh, well, how hard can that be? But this movie proves it can actually be pretty difficult because there's a lot of scenes where Tom Hanks really has to get into that little kid part of his brain and give these reactions in a way that feels genuinely like a kid, how a kid would respond to adult situations. And there's all kinds of adult situations. There's dating, workplace drama, there's impressing the boss. There's something that just seems so basic as spending the night at a really seedy motel that, when you look at it from a kid's perspective, is one of the most terrifying experiences of their life. So Tom Hanks having to deliver on all of that over the course of this movie is really impressive. But if I can have one criticism on his performance, as good as he is and as genuinely heartfelt as it comes across, he doesn't feel like a 12-year-old kid trapped in a grown man's body. He feels more like a 8 or younger. He feels very young, especially compared with the young Josh that we saw, who's actually 12 years old and acts like he's 12 years old. Now we have older Tom Hanks acting younger than his younger counterpart was, and that is a little distracting. It's a little inconsistent because I feel like his reaction to things, especially in the dating world, when him and Elizabeth Perkins, this lady that he works with, start having a bit of a romance, his reactions to things wouldn't be as naive and innocent as they're played off here. And I feel like they did that because they really wanted to emphasize the youth and to kind of steer away from this kind of potentially predatory relationship that's going on. And if you think about it for a little bit too long, what Elizabeth Perkins is unknowingly doing to this 12-year-old boy is not exactly legal. And even when she realizes the truth behind all this, she still has feelings for him and doesn't completely reject him outright. And granted, it is an awkward situation. She developed feelings for this guy not knowing he was a 12-year-old kid, and when that's all revealed, she's gonna have a lot of conflicting emotions and she's gonna have to figure that out. I feel like the movie could have framed that in a little bit better way just to make it feel like her character isn't still hitting on a 12-year-old boy, even at the end of the movie when he does revert back. But at the end of the day, this is a comedy. So how funny is it? Well, this movie's hilarious. Not only is it laugh out loud funny with just the physical comedy involved in him all of a sudden becoming big, the situational comedy of him not understanding an adult world and having this very naive look at everything. But this movie isn't afraid to get a little dark with the comedy too, because when he does become big the next morning, his mom thinks he's a stranger, a robber, an attacker, and she completely freaks out. He runs out of the house scared. He doesn't know what to do. And then he continues to call her throughout this movie, giving her updates as if he's a kidnapper that has her son with him. And he keeps saying, oh, he can't come to the phone right now, but he'll give you a message, and that just makes it seem even sadder from the mom's perspective. She's really going through it in this movie, and the movie doesn't really focus on it because most of the comedy is focused on the business world and what Josh is going through. But every so often we'll get a glimpse back on how his mom is handling all this, and it is still funny because we know that Josh is fine. He's the one talking to her, and he's trying to find his way back to her in a young body again, but who knows how long that's going to take. But even going back to that night he spends in that really dingy motel, when Josh starts crying on his bed because of the gunshots and the screaming going on outside of his door, a lesser comedy would have had a good Samaritan or somebody knock on his door, come check on him, console him, make him feel better so he can spend the night. But no, this movie doesn't do that. This movie just lets him suffer the night alone. No help's coming, which is funny because that's how the adult world is. You kind of have to tough it out on your own a little bit. There's no real safety net for stuff like that. But by far the best comedic moments in this movie come from this toy corporation that Josh starts working at. He gets his start in computers and analytics, where he starts typing in stuff in computers because he knows computers because he's a kid. But when he starts giving his thoughts on toys, which again, he's a kid, he knows toys, he knows what kids like, all of a sudden the boss and all these higher ups start paying attention to him. He gets promoted. He starts making a lot of money, and he ends up getting paid to just play with toys and tell people what he thinks about them, which is actually kind of similar to a lot of YouTube channels right now that are run by actual children. So yeah, maybe this movie did inspire something, and not just the Insecticon Transformers, because that is the other really big laugh that I get from this movie, and it's when he's talking about Transformers and he's like, well, it's cool when it's a robot, but when it's a building, what do you do with a building? It's boring. Why don't you just make it bugs or something? Then they can play with the bug form and the robot form. And yeah, that is a really cool idea. It makes the Transformers a lot better in my opinion. And that's really all there is to Big. It's a pretty simple premise. It's a simple movie. It's a movie whose premise has been reinterpreted, gender flipped, done over and over again. You even see its DNA rubbing off in superhero movies like Shazam. In some ways, I feel like Big's legacy is more famous than the movie itself, because you look at all these other spin-offs and even just the iconography of Tom Hanks dancing on that massive keyboard on the floor of FAO Schwartz. Even people that haven't seen this movie or don't even know about this movie's existence know about that image and the childlike whimsy that it inspires. But revisiting this movie, even though there are some things with Elizabeth Perkins' character that may not be entirely PC today, given that she's in a relationship with a 12-year-old boy, the movie is still incredibly funny. It's so heartfelt. Everything that Tom Hanks delivers feels genuine. It feels like something a child would say or do in that moment. Now, it doesn't always feel like it's something a 12-year-old child would feel or say in that moment, but it does feel genuinely innocent, and that's really what you want out of this movie. You want to see how a child would react stepping into an adult's world for the first time and not being at all prepared for it. But now I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about Big? Is it a movie that you haven't seen in a while? I feel like this is a movie that a lot of people have seen once or twice, but people sleep on this movie. I feel like a lot of people don't appreciate just how well executed the ideas in this movie really are. Whatever you think, let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.